and I've always been interested in perhaps growing lavender. So I'm very, very interested to hear about it.
Thanks, Ali. David, would you mind saying a couple of words?
Yes, yeah, David Talbot from ADAS. I've been with ADAS for just over 14 years now, specialising in all aspects of production ornamentals really, but a keen interest in pest disease, weed control in particular.
Thank you. And other David?
Hello, is that me?
Yes, please.
Hi. Well, I'm David Phillips. I farm between Newport and Cardiff. Very well sort of diversified, and we're perhaps looking for another sort of visitor attraction type venture for the summer. We grow Christmas trees, pumpkins, and did a maze last summer with sunflowers.
Lovely, thanks, David. Michael and James.
Hi there, it's James and Michael Hooton from Anglesey. We have a pick your own and a farm shop in Anglesey, and we're always interested in something new, so that's why we're here today.
Great, thank you. Wendy?
Hi, morning. Name's Wendy. I've got a florist called Blodwen Flowers specialising in weddings. I'm going to be doing this year growing a little bit of my own things, so I'm interested in growing lavender so I can use it with my flowers for weddings.
Superb, thanks, Wendy. And Aled?
Yeah, hi, I'm Aled from Tinnerton Farms up near Carnarvon, traditional sheep farmers and looking to diversify.
Superb, thank you. Is that everybody? Have I missed? Oh, Gabrielle. And
Hello.
Esther, we'll come on to you. Hi, Gabrielle.
Hi, I'm Gabrielle Roxby. I'm a senior research technician at ADAS Horticulture. Ewan introduced me to this project, so I'm just going to be taking some notes for him. And I'm interested to learn more about this as well.
Thanks, Gabby. Esther? Oh, you're on mute, Esther. It's usually me.
Yeah, so I'm living on a small holding in Wellingomiergraaf near Carmarthen. But I got introduced to this project via Justine Burgess. I'm doing work for her on West Wales willows. And yeah, on my small holding, I'm always looking for new activities.
Oh, superb. Welcome, Esther. And Chris?
Hi. Yeah. Oh, sorry, yeah, another Chris. Yeah, sorry.
Different Chris.
It's Chris Harry Thomas. We farm on the Gower. We've started adding in quite a few crops to our normal grain operation. We've grown quite a bit of buckwheat, sunflowers, pumpkins last year, and just interested to see whether this is something we should look at within what we're doing and diversifying to.
Superb. Thank you, Chris. I think that is everybody. Is there anybody that I've missed? No, I think that's everybody. I'll hand back over to you, Chris. Chris C.
Right. Slide 2 then, please. Right, I'm doing the introduction. I'm Chris Creed from ADAS. I've been working in Wales for the last 25, 30 years, so I know most farms there, but seems to be one or two nice new ones on today, which is useful because we're spanning two types of production here. We're coupling farm tourism with the nursery stock production. So what lavender is a very versatile crop, and I've actually took notice of the introductions, and we have got a bit of talk about cut flowers, so we'll hopefully cover all the bases. There are some very, very successful lavender businesses about. There's a couple in Wales established businesses, and there's some mega businesses, Cotswold Lavender and Norfolk Lavender, and they're very useful living in a sort of 8-week season, really. So it's fitting in well with the farm tourism that we're leading with, the pick your own, and like Chris Thomas says, with the sunflowers and the pumpkins. So it's all starting to group together. We're going to try and get events for every couple of months, or hopefully every month, and get the benefits out of your infrastructure. Dave Talbot's going to cover the first bit on container production, and then I'll come on to the field grown and farm tourism. So next slide introduce David.
Okay, hi folks. So focusing on the container production of lavender to start. It's a crop with its quirks, which we'll cover as we go through. So next slide. So propagation, it can be propagated in-house or bought in as plugs. Really depends on your facilities. If you've got suitable sort of propagation facilities, if you're already propagating nursery stock, it's certainly one you could propagate yourself. Species varieties normally raised from seed, but if you're sort of new to lavender, starting out, it's probably easier to buy plugs, particularly if you haven't got a propagation facility already, and see how you get on with those. There's a couple of suppliers mentioned there that can supply them. Okay, next slide. So typical sort of production route for most ornamentals, and lavender in particular, is to start them off in a plug, whether that be from seed or from a cut-in, as we said on the previous slide, and then move these into a small pot, which is sort of a 9 to 10 centimetre, and in the trade this is known as a liner, if anyone's not familiar with that term, and grow them on in that before you move them on into a bigger pot. Lavender is a crop that doesn't like to have wet feet, and if you over pot it straight into a big pot, it's not going to perform well for you. So the main thing to have in mind with lavender production, it's a Mediterranean type plant. It wants dry, well drained conditions, and in the winter in particular we need to keep it as dry as we can to minimize any losses. Also, despite being a Mediterranean type plant, high summer temperatures, as experienced under glass and indeed polytunnels, can create a lot of stress for them, and this can result in problems occurring linked to that stress. So we'll get flare-ups of Pythium, which is a pathogen that causes root rot and then associated losses. And yes, you can drench it to control it with conventional fungicides, but it's better to avoid the problem. And certainly growers that I've worked with in recent years in hot summers, we know the sort of climate's changing, and we do seem to get these bursts of extremely hot weather, sort of up to 30 degrees, and under glass it can be much hotter, of course, and under tunnels. So they've found that some varieties can be more susceptible to this stress, and they've actually moved to potting those types of varieties that they struggle with in the heat of summer out under sort of a low Spanish French tile tunnel type system, and removing the polythene when that heat strikes, and that has been a great success and really cut the losses to the bare minimum. So that's a useful technique. Also, autumn potting can result in high winter losses. They're very prone to botrytis, but you need to have that in your mind and do everything culturally that you can to minimize its chances, really. So when you're watering this crop in the winter in particular, but any time of year when there's a disease risk, which under protection is most of the year, having the back of your mind, minimize the period of leaf wetness, particularly where you're watering overhead. So try and pick a day, particularly in the winter where it's bright and sunny, where you'll minimize the amount of time that leaf stays wet, because most diseases require wetness to affect the leaf. And even if they're dry in the winter, they'll stand it for a few days till you get that optimum day. Also, get your water on in the morning, so it's as dry as possible before evening, because if they sit wet overnight, it's just opening the floodgates to let disease in. So doing everything culturally we can to keep the pathogens at bay is the main thing. Also, I haven't got a photo of it unfortunately, but these trays of liners, they're typically in sort of trays of 18 or 20, 18, 20, about that number. So what people have done successfully, where they know a variety is perhaps more prone to botrytis, or they've had problems in the past, they'll what we call checkerboard, so leave a gap between every plant so there's some air around it, and that certainly helps. It's another cultural control. that reduces the humidity around that plant canopy and reduces susceptibility. Obviously, it's sort of cutting the amount per square metre, but if you're saving, chucking vast numbers away, which you can do with lavenders, it's worth doing. All that said, you do need a robust spray program in place as well to keep botrytis in particular at bay and prevent other foliar diseases that they can get. And just in case people aren't aware of it, the Tyfu Cymru Ornamental Network is going to be kicking off fairly soon with focus on bioprotectants, which are registered as conventional pesticides, but they're live things that control pests and diseases for us, and it's a direction of travel, and we found that these can work very well in disease control programs. And even if you're a bit reluctant to use them, you really need to, because we're losing so many products. These types of products we can slot in between our conventional fungicides and make up a program. Without them, we struggle to get enough applications on to keep everything in check. So next slide. So finals production, this is the picture here is of liner production. I'm afraid I haven't got one to hand, the final production. So if you can possibly avoid overwintering finals, that's a useful technique to minimize your losses. As I've said, autumn potting can result in high losses, but if you can get them potted in a way by August, if you are overwintering stock, so it's made some growth, toughened up a bit, it's not in that really soft, lush, freshly potted stage, it'll go into winter much better, and you'll minimize the amount of losses. So planning your production is important. As ever, you need a good spray program in place in your finals. Okay, next slide. So proactive foliar disease prevention is key, really. I've already touched on this a bit, but ensuring crops are well spaced, particularly in final production, so you don't want to have them pot thick, pots touching. Ensuring your glasshouse and tunnel is well ventilated, so by that we mean having doors and windows, doors, vents open on all but the frosty days, really. Even if it's cold and dreek, we want to have those open because it'll give some air movement and disperse the humidity. We've covered minimizing leaf wetness with timing your watering, and another useful technique is utilizing fans, which can be put on after watering to help dry those leaves off, just moving some air around within the structure. And there are fans available these days with humidistats, so you can set them at a percentage humidity, which as soon as disease risk increases and humidity goes up, those fans will automatically come on no matter what time of day or night, and reduce susceptibility to disease. Grow them on the dry side on a well drained bed, and as dry as you dare over winter. They don't need as much water as you may think, and not just lavenders, but I see more crops in nursery stock that are killed with overwatering than underwatering. If you can produce them on sub-irrigated beds, that'll help because it's keeping that foliage dry again. If you do start to get any losses, so the picture there, it's a bit hidden by everyone's faces, but hopefully you can see it. It's classic botrytis on a young, fairly soft lavender there. As soon as you see those sorts of symptoms, it's worth tackling them. So if you haven't had a recent fungicide application, getting that on and disposing of plants such as that promptly, because the spores will spread and you really want to get rid of those as soon as possible, certainly weekly. Even if there's one or two, nipping it in the bud is the key, and particularly prior to any watering, because that's, again, you're creating good conditions for disease, and everything's wet and there's disease there. It's something we want to avoid. So next slide. So proactive root disease prevention. Root disease isn't as big a problem as foliar disease, but keeping them on the dry side definitely helps. Growing media needs to have a high airfill porosity, so that relates to the amount of air in the rooting zone. And if a compost or growing media is kept very wet, you will reduce that airfill porosity because some of the small pores will potentially fill with moisture. So another reason for keeping things on the dry side. They need to be grown under protection from autumn to late spring to protect from excess rainfall. And if you have had root problems, it's worth considering including some biological type things in the growing media. And people have had success with Trianum and T34. So Trianum's a strain of Trichoderma's various products that can be incorporated into the growing media or drenched on, which grow and round the roots, effectively protecting them from disease and generally work well for people. Now, I've covered a lot of the things that can go wrong with lavenders, but if you take the advice and grow them well, grow them on the dry side, you can produce a great crop. So I don't want to frighten anyone off with this. It's just things to be aware of and things to look out for, and hopefully giving you some of the techniques can avoid problems and help you produce a good crop. And as I said, there's further support available through the Tyfu Cymru Ornamentals Network, including one-to-one Zooms if people need more information. So on that, I'll pass over to Chris.
Right, next slide, please. Right, before we go on to field lavender production, are there any questions from the floor for David? Well, you've got them fresh in your mind, but if there's anything you want to know on container production, now's your chance to weigh in with a question. Okay, everybody's happy by the sound of it. Next slide then, please. Lavender for farm tourism. There seems to be a good area for some crops in Wales, and we're looking at various things now. It's sunflowers have been mentioned, pumpkins, and I think lavender is a useful crop to go for. It's when it's in full flower, it's spectacular. It gets full of bumblebees and butterflies, and it's a real treat to see it. Certainly stop a car and pull into a field to witness it and take a few photos. Flowering season seems to be in Wales, it's late June to mid-August, so you've got a fair time there, including quite a bit of the school summer holidays. You can take it as far as you want, really. Even put up a visitor centre and you know, have events or whatever. You can do value-added sales. It's a crop that's there's a mass of value-added opportunities on it, and either bought in or make your own, have a go at your own. Unlike pumpkins, it's a perennial crop, so if you look after your beds well and manage them, you should get up to 10 years out of a crop of lavender, and maybe even longer. The records of them in some of these old gardens being 100 years old, and the actual trunks being thicker than your wrist. Use of social media is the key to these farm tourism projects. So where you start building up a case when you plant, and then you hopefully get people on board, and just keep posting things and using progress, get people involved in the farm. It's not my real strong subject, but use of social media, and I think there is help under Tyfu for it. So you know, get on board with that and start promoting it very, very early on in the system and get people engaged with your farm. With COVID-19, we've been developing booking systems on pick your own farms, and this seems to be very, very successful. And there's people on this call today better than me at it, but we've been able to structure the number of visitors on the farms. We're avoiding getting overwhelmed, and I think it involves with a bit more organisation and a better day out for the people. So that's been a useful learning curve, really, and people don't seem to mind having to book. And with lavender, it's probably best to charge an entry fee for the site. Often in pumpkins, we just let people in free and they buy the pumpkins, but some crops probably demand an entrance fee to the farm, and depending on the effort you've made, you know, you can set that you know, between £5 and £10, £15 a car. There will be some opportunities for sales, and you know, try and get £10 a person if you can, and you know, look at it that way. But charging for entrance is probably the way forward with lavender. Right, next one, please. Down the value added, we've got the dried flowers, the potpourri, and the lavender pillows and all that sort of paraphernalia that's associated with the crop. Helps you sleep, apparently. Fresh flowers, so that would be for the wedding tray, whatever, and long-lasting fresh flower. And even if they're not kept full of water, they'll persist a long time. You can distill your own oil. It's apparently not economic, but you know, it's nice to be able to do this and demonstrate it. And it's a fairly simple technique from what I gather. It's just a case of getting a clean trailer full of lavender and then passing steam through it. And it's not sort of distillation like you do with whiskey and stuff. And there's loads and loads of cosmetics and soaps and things. It's probably help with this in Wales if you know where to look, and we can put get the team onto it. But there are food centres in Wales, but hopefully there are sort of value-added developing centres, and you get advice and help on that. You've got catering opportunities, so when your lavender farm is open for that 8-week period, you can have a pop-up shop or a pop-up restaurant, and people then can sort of treat it as a bit of a day out. And on top of your field grown and the spectacle, you can also sell some plants. So you could get a tunnel and then go on to a system similar to what David was recommending earlier. So a lot of opportunities there for just one crop. You know, we haven't got half of that with pumpkins and sunflowers and even soft fruit. So next one, please. Right. This is sort of the system that I go for with lavender, and it's based on putting a membrane out in the field. And the field that is in the picture there is half-acre field. It's been designed with the farmer in mind, really. He's got tractors that straddle a 2-metre bed, and he's got a topper that will mow that path. So he's laid it out that basis. I mean, normally we'd have a narrower bed than that and a narrower path. So with ordinary tackle, I suppose you could have like strawberries, you could have a 1-metre bed and a 1-metre path, and get down over the tractor. The Mypex, which is the cover that we tend to go for, comes in various widths. That's a 2-metre, and then you anchor it with these Mypex nails, and that's been down now since the autumn. Obviously, the field was round up before we put the sheet on. That field is really good ground, so there's no need for us to make up a raised bed. It drains well. It's a sandy loam soil, and if the soil was any hint of bad drainage, we would have thrown up a raised bed, either by ploughing 2 forests together or going through with a bit of potato tackle, and then you sort of you're sure then that the drainage is going to be perfect. This crop does need good drainage. David's touched on it being a Mediterranean plant, which means that it likes to be warm and it likes to be dry. So the mulch helps with that. If you don't like the look of the mulch, you can always put wood chip or something on it. Usually a phone call to your local tree surgeon involves, they'll start taking wood chip to your farm, and then you can use it for the pathways, or you can use it to cover the beds. But that saves you a lot of work on weed control for a 10-year crop, and that will last 10 years, and it's still pretty good after 10 years. And that basically is a model I've used for organic soft fruit. I've used it for perennial cut flowers, and I've used it for lavender. So I'm happy that it works, and it's a good robust system. I've also seen soft fruit growing through it, like black currants and gooseberries, and it's amazing to me that the soil structure underneath it develops really well. So you get really good rooted, and the plants tend to be a lot happier on it. Irrigation, it seems daft at the time when you're putting the beds in not to put a trickle tape underneath it. But I would think 9 years out of 10, once you've got the lavender away, then you won't need irrigation on it, especially in West Wales. So you might think, well, I don't think trickle tape is particularly expensive, so just put it in case, and you can always connect a hose pipe up to it eventually, but I don't think you need it. Mypex is a woven polypropylene, and as it's woven, it will let water through it, so the water doesn't run off, and you can also feed through it, so you can put your feed on top of that bed and the rain will take it through. But it's close enough weave to prevent the bulk of the weeds coming through it. You might get the odd bit of grass, but if you plant on that through a very small hole, then you're going to have very, very little weeding to do, and you know, weeding in lavender is quite difficult. And if you had a bare root field with herbicides, that would be a bit of a nightmare. Right, next one, please. Right, this picture is that system in action, and this was a bit of funding we got in Wales a few years ago for a lavender farm on Anglesey. Unlike the sort of W programme, the funding wasn't extended, so I lost sight of that project, but it did go really well. As you can see there, they decided to use a grass path, which tend to be the biggest management headache in the field, because the grass kept wanting to get through the lavender. So I would have been much happier with a wood chip mulch on the path and topped up every year. But you can see one or two things there. It's quite a spectacle. That's year 2 from a liner, from what David was describing as a liner, which is a rooted plug in a 7 to 9 centimetre pot, 2 rows on a bed, and it was a 2 metre wide bed. We did do a raised bed on there just with ordinary farm kit with a potato ridger, so that was fairly easy. And yeah, that was a workable system, and it produced a nice crop of lavender. And yeah, quite happy to recommend it, really. Apparently it's recyclable if it's clean, and don't rush into it without thinking what you're going to do with the pathway, because you don't want, obviously, you don't want a pathway full of weeds. You don't want a high management pathway, and you can put down some type of mulch on that. You could go over all Mypex if you wanted to, and then just put wood chip on the pathways on top of the Mypex, and that would work well. And if it's got wood chip on it, you can still drive a tractor over it. So, you know, Mypex isn't that good at resisting tractor wheels, but you know, it stands it for a year or two, then it starts to wear through. If it's got wood chip on it, you can drive through it. So that's the basic system that I would recommend. If you want to go down the route of just planting in a bare field and using herbicides, then we can help with that, but it's not going to be 100% reliable. Right, so next one, please. Planting season, if we're using container plants, will be March to May. If you go into April, May, especially if it was like 2020, you're going to need water to get them away, but that can be done through a tank on a tractor and feed through a lance, and they only need water for that first month, I expect. Plant through the holes. Normally you cut a square hole with a very sharp Stanley knife type thing, and then plant by hand through there. Put the trickle again just to reinforce the point, but I can't see us really needing trickle irrigation on lavender in a field in Wales. There's various types of lavender. There's the dwarf ones that naturally grow small and compact, and then there's the large grosso types, which they tend to use for the oil production. That's a big thing that gets almost a metre tall. So we go 30-40 centimetres apart. That's a foot to bit over a foot in real money, and the grosso types on 2 foot. Any bed width, I think the Mypex comes in loads of sizes. I think the biggest sheet you can get is a 12 metre, but they're probably bigger than that now. Rough price on Mypex I've been given is £1 a metre, but I've heard of farms getting it for a lot less than that, £1 a square metre, so that helps. Planting material, David mentioned it, and we use the same planting material in these beds that he talked about. So we've got plugs. I think you'd be unwise to plant a plug in a bed. You've got liners, and if you're on good conditions and you're confident, then you could plant a liner in a bed, or you could put in finished stock. And the prices we worked out sort of back of a fag packet is a plug will cost you 50p. A liner will cost you £1.50, and a large stock plant from £3 to £5. This also implicates on, I'll touch on this a bit later on, but it also implicates on when in the period of development that field becomes a visitor attraction. So obviously you can't expect a load of visitors to come with a load of tiny lines in a big wide bed and nothing else. So anyway, we'll touch on that a bit later. Can I have the next one, please? I think you plan out really to suit what machinery you've got. So you know, if you're going to do a huge field, then you're going to need to get a tractor through it, or some type of equipment. And if you're doing everything by hand, then go on the meter bed, meter path, and that gives you 5,000 meters of bed per hectare, which, you know, entail 8,000 plants. So at 150 a plant, you're talking about 12,000 a hectare. I reckon that an area of 2,000 square meters or half an acre would be enough to create a spectacle that would draw the punters in. An acre would be better than that, and a hectare would be better than that. So, you know, it's a difficult one, really. If you go value added, you probably need more production, but I think half an acre, that field at the top there was a half an acre, and it, you know, it was a big field and there was a lot of beds in it, so it looked quite interesting. But if you don't do it big enough, you can always add on to it later on. So I've also seen designer layouts. I had a farm that did an organic farm, it was, and he did a sort of lavender garden as part of his visitor attraction, and he divided it into 4 and did a bit of a maze and a labyrinth through it, and that was all planted through broadacre mypex, and worked quite well. We had 4 varieties in the plots, and one of them was a complete disaster, French lavender one, but the others thrived. So in the end we replaced them, but it was quite a good thing. And in the end he started doing on-farm weddings, which apparently is getting more and more popular. You don't have to provide a huge amount of attractions, people just want somewhere they can put up a tent apparently, and have somewhere to take photos. So the maze, lavender maze, would come into that. And what's the bottom line on that? It's just off my screen at the moment. Sarah, what's the bottom line on the?
Sorry, Chris, it was fewer machines.
Oh, fewer machines, yeah. Obviously, if you do a maze type thing or a labyrinth, then you've got to do mostly handwork on it. If you're going to start cutting the lavender for the value added in the distillation and that, there are machines, and some of them are like almost like prams, really. They're just on 4 wheels, and you have 2 people pushing them, and they're based on tea harvesters, and they come largely from New Zealand, and you just push them through, and all the lavender ends up in a big bag. And then on the big farms like Cotswold Lavender, they've got a silage head that goes on to a silage cutter. So, you know, it'd be a bit daft if you were wanting to do a big area and you hadn't allowed the planting to get a silage cutter through it. There is a head that you can buy that will cut lavender and then shoot it into a trailer. So then you need to plan your planting system on that, you know, on that. So the actual way you plant it doesn't really matter. And obviously, if you're doing farm attraction, then you want a fair bit of room. So, you know, it might be better with a 2-meter bed and a 2-meter path, so people can get down in amongst it. I calculate really, if you're planting a liner or a decent stock plant, then you're going to be 2 years in development before you can invite, and that might mean that you can get into opening the farm up July year 2, or it might mean that you have to open up the farm in July year 3, and then you're going to get 10 years out of it. Farm shop and cafe pop-ups seem to be very popular, and they've become destinations in their own right if you develop a cafe. If you've got other attractions, such as pick your own and soft fruit and pumpkins, then your pop-up shop becomes more and more financially viable, obviously, the more you use it. The oil distillation and processing can be an attraction in itself, so you can do tours around the stills and tours around the way you do it, and you know, talk to people, get it on your Facebook, etc. And that harvesting will be ongoing while the attraction is going. So, and then on top of that, you can have a farm shop with all the nice lavender products in it, and you either buy in or you go down the road of developing your own. So loads and loads of scope of this crop. It's got more scope. There's often more scope in ornamental plants than there is in edibles. We had that one before, no? Yeah, we've had that one, haven't we? We're going backwards now. Those grosso types will just slow down a bit. Grosso types will obviously establish, because they're a lot bigger, they grow quicker, and then that might mean that you open a little bit early on. You can also plant high density, which will give you a better effect. And yeah, is there another one now? Next one. All right. Yeah. So you get your plants in, and the system just decides itself really. The farther apart you plant them, the lower density you plant, then defines how long it's going to be before you can get open on it. But it's going to reduce the price. I've worked out roughly in my head, and I reckon you could plant a half an acre plot for about £3,000. So that would be my approach to it. On resources, Dave touched on this, but we've done a technical advice sheet, and that's up on the Tyfu Cymru Resources website. So that's available now, and you can have a look at that. When the COVID restrictions are lifted, we can do one-to-one farm visits, so we can come and visit you on your site and see how you're getting on and what prospects you've got, and what the ground looks like, and your proximity to various other. It's helpful if you're on a decent road, but not a mad busy road. So that's the same thing with pick your own and any sort of visitor attraction. Obviously on Gower, you've got loads and loads of people there looking for something to do, and the same on any coastal area in Wales. But it can be a sort of destination attraction in its own right, and that's quite a useful thing to have. We've been getting some success with one-to-one Zoom meetings when it's a bit less formal than this, and you can just get on a Zoom for half an hour or an hour and have a chat with me or David or both, and we can go through the process with you as it's relevant to your farm really. There's also all the other communication things that we're doing. If there's enough folks after it, we can start up a Tyfu WhatsApp group, and we find out with the pumpkin and the soft fruit groups that there's a lot of self-help comes from the group. So we've had people like sorting out things like in-field payment with cards and things without necessarily involving the experts. We always have an expert in digital marketing, but telephone, email, text, eventually we will give you an answer, and we're always contactable, and this is such a good program that it's really good to get you started, and whatever you do, we're always going to be there for you and give you support. And we've heard every question, we've faced every disaster, so we never get frightened off, and you've got that in the background before. Another thing Tyfu are good at is digital marketing support, and this helps you get the most out of your website and your social media. So there's always that road to go down. And we don't do that in ADAS, but we stick to the technical issues, but very, very useful service. And go to the next one.
There's a question coming from Ali. Chris, do you want to do that now or at the end?
Yeah, well, question, Dave, you want to cover that? But it'd be like Munstead and the shorter ones, and Grosso for the taller ones. I think if you're doing cut flowers, you'd have a range, and you grow all sorts, because there's not much of a colour range from sort of white through pink to obviously the deep purple, but the main thing with them is they're all different sites. So there's Hidcut, Munstead Dwarf, Grosso is the sort of the general field one. I don't know, Dave, what do you think?
Yeah, that sounds a good plan. There is a variety called, I think it's Rosea from memory, and it's sort of a pinky colour. You don't very often see it, but that would be perhaps one to seek out for a bit of novelty value, particularly for cut flowers, if you're wanting to use those sorts of colours in colour schemes. Also, there's another question from Alison, Chris, saying they're on limestone pavement in South Wales, soil is clay loam and get very wet in winter. And how would they cope in winter? I'd say they'd probably struggle if they're on the wet side in winter.
It's a big ask there. You've got to do a lot of improvement, and depends on how much soil you got to work with. But the only hope you've got is to build up a big raised bed. You might have to get in a load of green compost or something and just, you know, just not grow them in the ground and let them root into it when eventually they get down that deep. But they do like lime, so you know, they do like high pH, so you know, they might have some scope. Difficult to say, but that's really the reason that an on-farm one-to-one visit is invaluable. But unfortunately, at the moment, we're not allowed to do them. But usually there is some scope. And in soft fruit now, we've moved out of soil into hydroponic substrate systems, and there's no reason why in lavender you couldn't do a hydroponic substrate system and plant it up with lavender instead of soft fruit. So that, you know, we do big pots for raspberries, between 1/3 of a litre and 15 litre, depending on the enterprise, and we do strawberries in grow bags essentially, and we got all the technology for that, and the feed, the water, and that. So there's no reason why that wouldn't translate to lavender. So, you know, really, then you can grow on a piece of concrete if you want to. So there's some scope there. Don't be put off by your bad ground.
So just touching back on the foliar diseases that we spent quite a bit of time on with the containers, it's fair to say that in the field they're not the problem, are they, Chris? You're not really going to even need to do much spraying.
That's a good point, David. Yeah, it's once you've got it in the field, and especially if you're cutting the flowers off, it gets its annual pruning. And what you don't want with lavender is for them to get dead in the bottom. If you're on small areas, you can get some really nice handheld reciprocating blade cutters, and we've been using those in soft fruit, and they're particularly good. And you can just go through and trim all your hedges with those, and that pruning lets in the air. And foliar diseases, you know, they're often a thing with tunnels, aren't they? If you're out of tunnels, then the fresh air comes through them, and a lot of these things more or less disappear. You will get a bit of death, but you know, you can always go through and gap that up and keep it nice and tidy. But you do see some impressive big stands of it. If you go on the Cotswold or the Lavender or the Norfolk Lavender websites, then you know, you see that big old machine going through, and it looks very, very impressive. And you can understand why this year they had to close on many occasions because they were booked out. And that, you know, that's a really good opportunity for Wales, I think, as a part of a mixed farm offering, as David Phillips said, diversifying tactics and getting people engaged with the farm pretty much every month.
Just touching on soil type again, Chris, that farm in the Cotswolds Lavender, I've not been to it, but I imagine it's on Cotswold brash, so the drainage should be very good if that's the case.
Yeah, the drainage would be good, and the pH would be 8 upon that ground.
Yeah, so it's ideal for the crop.
Sorry, Dave, interrupted you there.
That's right. I was just saying the soil is ideal for the crop there, so it just highlights the crop that's fitting the soil type, really.
Yeah, when you look in the literature, the pH range is 5 to 8.5. So I mean, it's a massive range. But I think the happier at pH is about 7 or more. And there's also the sort of crops that naturally go with lavender, things like rosemary and that. And there's no reason why you can't, you know, have hedges of rosemary in amongst your lavender. Use a bit of imagination and, you know, just make it a lot more interesting. There's some beautiful rosemaries about as there is lavenders. And probably as many value-added opportunities. So sky's the limit, really. You know, you could have a really nice field, and something I'm quite looking forward to seeing a few of these develop. So you know, hopefully somebody will take it on and give it a go. Any more questions in the chat? So
do feel free, if you want to, just unmute yourself to ask Chris any questions. Just give it a couple more minutes. Sorry, Chris, were you going to say something else?
I was going to say to Wendy, really, that you know, we could look into the lavenders and the different types, but I mean, there's myriad of them, and it's a question of what spec you want for your flowers, how tall you want them, and I'm sure that, you know, there's a lot of the French types, aren't there? Sticus or something, David?
Sticus, yeah.
Yeah, and they're sort of butterfly lavenders. They're nice. So there's I don't know. I guess in the national collections, there's probably 30 or 40, wouldn't there be, Dave?
Yeah.
So a lot of scope, and depends what spec you want there, Wendy, really. So yeah. don't be frightened off by it.
Superb. Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you, David. That was really informative. Anybody wants to pursue it further, as has already been mentioned, please just get in touch and we can book you a one-to-one Zoom at the moment, face-to-face when we get out and about later on in the year. If you want the digital marketing support, please also give us a shout. We can fit a one-to-one Zoom in on that with whatever level you want to look at in terms of websites, social media, digital marketing strategy. Just give us a shout. Sarah's kindly put in the chat the survey details. If you could please copy that and do the very quick survey. It should only be a couple of minutes, but it really helps us with future development of our online training meetings. We're opting to do this format now where everybody is on site and you can see us and we can see you, and we feel it's a bit more interactive. But feel free, if you come on any other sessions, you can unmute yourself and ask the questions if you want to. So great, hope that was useful. I don't think there's any more questions. So thank you again for joining us and we'll see you soon.
Thanks very much, everybody, for turning up.
Thank you. Bye.
Guys, bye-bye.
Thank
very much.
you.
Yes, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.